The forest called my name that night, a low, chilling murmur that slithered through the pines, wrapping around my heart like frost on a barren branch. I was 17, standing at the edge of the Dinaric Alps, my breath fogging in the biting autumn, ere my Zastava M70 rifle a heavy anchor in my trembling hands. The trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their shadows weaving secrets older than the village itself. I was Marko Petrovic, a boy forged in loss, raised by my grandmother in a crumbling house at the forest's edge, where the line between life and death felt thin as a whisper. That night, something waited for me in the woods, something that would shatter my world, blurring dream and dread into a nightmare I could never escape. My parents were ghosts, stolen by a storm on the Adriatic Sea when I was barely 2. A capsized boat, a handful of faded photographs on Baka's wooden shelf, and a hollow ache in my chest were all they left behind. My grandfather was gone before I could know him, his face a stranger in Baka's stories. It was just me and Baka, two souls bound by love in a house where the forest crept too close, its branches scraping the windows like restless spirits seeking entry. Baka's hands, rough as the rocky soil we tilled, bore countless needle scars from years at the textile factory. Yet her eyes held a warmth that could melt the coldest winter. She'd shuffle home after long shifts, her shoulders bowed, her fingers pricked raw, and still find strength to cook, to sit with me, to weave tales of the old country, heroes, spirits, and things that stirred when the moon hid its face. Those stories were dreams, distant and safe, until that night turned them into something far darker. I took to hunting at 14, first with snares that snagged rabbits and pheasants, then with my rifle, bought with every kuna I'd scraped from odd jobs. The forest was my refuge, its silence a canvas for my thoughts, its paths as familiar as my own heartbeat. Feel the earth beneath your boots, Marko. Listen to the wind's secrets, the scent of pine, the rustle of leaves, the fleeting shadow of a deer. They were my world, my escape from the weight of our poverty. Bringing home meat was more than survival. It was a gift for Baka, whose tired smile deepened the wrinkles around her eyes, lighting up our dim kitchen. "My little provider," she'd say, her calloused hand warm on my cheek, anchoring me to her love. Those moments were worth more than the scarce coins we counted each month, worth more than the world beyond our village. That day dawned with an unease I couldn't name, a heaviness in the air like the sky was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Baka looked frail, her face pale as she packed her lunch. A scrap of bread, a spoonful of leftover beans, no coffee to warm her. She'd been working overtime for weeks, her body bending under the strain of a special order from Zagreb, her hands trembling as she tied her scarf. "I'll bring something good for dinner," I vowed, my voice catching as she kissed my forehead, her lips cool, almost ghostly, as if she knew something I didn't. School was a blur, my mind already in the forest, chasing the promise of a deer to ease her burden, to bring back that smile. The final bell was a release and I raced home, swapped my books for my rifle and stepped into the woods, the familiar path swallowing me like a dream I couldn't wake from. The forest was alive yet unnaturally still, the air thick with a metallic tang, blood or rust I couldn't tell. The light filtering through the canopy was dim, casting shadows that danced like specters, their edges sharp as knives. Hours passed without a sign of game. A deer flickered in the distance, too far for a shot, vanishing like a wisp of smoke into the undergrowth. Don't go home empty-handed, Marko. Not today. Desperation clawed at my chest, Baka's weary face etched in my mind. Her empty lunch a silent accusation. I pushed deeper, toward a clearing near the old logging road where animals sometimes grazed, my boots sinking into the frost-kissed earth. The sun sank, painting the sky in bruised purples and reds, and the new moon left the forest drowning in darkness. The trees seemed to lean closer, their branches whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear, their shadows curling like fingers around my heart. Then it came, a rustle, too deliberate, too near, cutting through the silence like a blade. My heart pounded, my grip tightening on the rifle, my breath shallow in the cold. I spun around expecting a fox or a boar, but there he stood, 10 meters away, as if woven from the shadows themselves, a man of average height, dark hair cropped short, his face tugging at the edges of memory yet unplaceable, like a figure from a half-forgotten dream. His jacket was worn but clean, his boots caked with mud, and his eyes, dark bottomless pools, held me captive, seeing through me to something deeper. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm, too warm, like a fire that could consume you if you lingered too long. The forest held its breath, the air growing heavier, colder, as if the world itself was watching. "A fine night for a hunt, isn't it?" I lowered my rifle, but my finger hovered near the trigger, instincts screaming that strangers didn't belong here, not in these woods, not in this darkness. "Yes," I said, my voice tight as a drawn bowstring. "But no luck today." He smiled, a curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that felt like a mask hiding something ancient. "The forest hides its treasures sometimes," he said, stepping closer, his boots silent on the leaves. I caught a scent, damp earth, old metal, and something older, like forgotten graves or secrets buried deep. "You're Marko Petrovic, aren't you? Anna's grandson." My blood froze, my heart stuttering in my chest. How did he know my name, Baka's name? The village was small, but I knew every face, every voice, and his was not one of them. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice sharper than the autumn air, cutting through the silence. He waved a hand, casual, almost dismissive, but his eyes never left mine. "Oh, I know many around here. Hunted these woods myself, back when I was your age." His gaze drifted over the trees, heavy with nostalgia. But there was something else. Grief, deep and unspoken, like a wound that never healed. "Name's Vuka. Well, some used to call me that. Vuka." The name stirred a memory, a fragment of Baka's stories about wolves and spirits, but it slipped away like mist through my fingers. "Stay sharp, Marko. Feel the rifle in your hands." "You from the village?" I asked, suspicion coiling tighter in my gut, a snake ready to strike. "Long ago," he said, his voice vague like a dream fading at dawn, his words trailing into the darkness. He shifted the conversation, asking about school, my plans, my dreams, his questions gentle yet probing, peeling back layers of my soul. "You're in your final year, aren't you? Thinking of university? Mechanical engineering, maybe?" How? Did he know? My unease grew, a cold knot tightening in my chest, but his voice was a lullaby, pulling me into a trance I couldn't resist. I answered despite myself, telling him of Zagreb, scholarships, my hopes to build a better life, to lift Baka from the weight of her endless labor. He nodded, his eyes glinting with pride, or perhaps something darker, something that knew too much. "Your grandmother must be proud, Marko. Anna always valued education, wanted it for your father too." My father. The words hit like a stone sinking into a still pond, ripples spreading through my mind. "You knew my father," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart, the forest's silence pressing against my ears. His smile turned sad, heavy with memory. his eyes distant as if seeing a world long gone. "Yes, Devore and I were close," he said, his voice soft, carrying the weight of years. He spoke of Baka's garden, the roses she tended with care. The house before its walls were patched, traditions only our family kept. Details no stranger could know, details that belonged to my blood. Each word wove a tapestry of my life, familiar yet impossible, like a dream I'd lived without knowing. Listen to him, Marco. He knows you. The forest grew darker, the stars above sharp as knives, their light cold and unyielding. We talked for what felt like hours, his questions endless, my childhood, my fears, my dreams for the future. I answered, caught in a strange compulsion, as if his voice held me captive, anchoring me to the spot. The trees seemed to close in, their branches, watching, judging, their shadows curling like fingers around my soul. He spoke of my father's youth, of hunts they'd shared, of moments I'd never known. His words painting scenes so vivid I could almost see Devore standing among the pines, young and alive, his laughter echoing through the trees. Your father was a wolf in these woods, Marco. Did you know that? The nickname Vuka echoed, a thread tying past to present, but I couldn't grasp its meaning, couldn't see the truth staring me in the face. The blackness of the forest finally snapped me awake. The stars were too bright, the air too cold, the silence too loud, pressing against my skin like a warning. "I have to go," I said, my voice trembling, my heart racing with sudden urgency. "Baka's waiting." His face flickered with pain, a shadow crossing his eyes, deep and raw. "Family is everything, Marco. Remember that, no matter what happens, family endures." His words burned into me, heavy with meaning I couldn't unravel, like a prophecy I wasn't ready to hear. I turned away, irritation flaring. I'd wasted hours talking instead of hunting, hours that could have brought meat to our table, a smile to Baka's face. Her tired eyes haunted me, her empty lunch a silent accusation. The path home was a labyrinth, the forest unnaturally silent, the air thick with warning, heavy as a storm about to break. My boots crunched on the frost-kissed ground, each step heavier, slower, as if the woods themselves were holding me back. Something was wrong, Marco. Hurry. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of dread as I neared the house. Baka's blue Zastava sat, outside, its faded paint glinting under the stars. But the sight stopped my heart. The front door hung open, swaying in the breeze, a silent scream in the night. The windows, 2 of them, were shattered, glass glittering like broken stars on the grass, catching the starlight in jagged edges. My rifle slipped from my hands, clattering to the earth, the sound swallowed by the silence. "Baka! Baka!" I ran, my voice tearing through the night, my heart a war drum, each beat screaming her name. Inside, the house was a nightmare, a wound torn open. Furniture lay overturned, drawers gutted, their contents spilled across the floor like the innards of a slaughtered animal. The small television was smashed, its screen a spiderweb of cracks, and there, in the living room, lay Baka, her purse spilled open, her blood pooling on the carpet we'd cleaned together days ago, its red seeping into the fibers like a stain on my soul. 3 bullet wounds marred her chest and stomach, dark and cruel, her eyes open, staring at a void I couldn't see. The world tilted, my knees buckling as I fell beside her, my hands trembling over her still form, her warmth already fading. She was gone, stolen while I lingered in the forest, caught in a stranger's spell. My mind was a storm, grief and guilt crashing together, drowning me in waves of pain. I touched her face, her skin cold, her eyes empty, and the weight of my failure crushed me. The hours that followed were a fog of grief, a dream I couldn't wake from. Neighbors came, drawn by my screams, their faces pale in the starlight, their voices distant murmurs. The police arrived, their questions mechanical, cutting through the haze. A burglary gone wrong, they said. Baca had surprised the intruders. They'd panicked, shot her, and fled with her jewelry and our small cash box, a pitiful haul for such a loss. Not enough to justify this, not enough to tear her from me. I answered their questions. Yes, I was hunting. No, I saw no one suspicious. No, we had no enemies. Each word a betrayal, a failure to protect her, a knife twisting in my gut. If I'd been here, if I hadn't talked to him. I stayed with the Kovac family, our neighbors, for 2 weeks. Their kindness a faint warmth against the cold of my grief. Their house smelled of bread and wood smoke, but it wasn't home. Then I was sent to Zagreb to live with my mother's cousin Ivana and her husband Dan. Their home was warm, their hearts open, but it wasn't Baca's. Nothing could replace her smile, her stories, her hand on my cheek, anchoring me to the world. For months I was a shadow moving through school and chores, haunted by guilt that gnawed like a beast. If I hadn't lingered in the forest, if I hadn't spoken to that man, could I have saved her, or would I have died with her? Both seemed better than this hollow ache, this life without her. 6 months later, a dinner with Ivana's family pierced the fog of my grief, a flicker of light in the darkness. As we sipped coffee, the bitter taste grounding me, talk turned to my parents. Ivana spoke of my father, Devor, his seriousness even as a boy, his quiet strength. Something stirred, a need to confess, to unburden my soul, to make sense of the night that broke me. I told them of the stranger in the forest, the man who called himself Vuka, who knew our family's secrets, Baca's garden, the house's old walls, the traditions we kept. The room fell silent. Ivana's coffee cup froze in midair, her eyes wide with something like fear. Vuka was your father's nickname, she said, her voice trembling barely above a whisper. Only family called him that when he was young, for how he tracked animals like a wolf. Dan's brother exchanged a glance with Ivana, a silent understanding passing between them. She rose, her hands shaking, and pulled a photo album from the shelf, its leather cover worn from years of touch. She opened it to a picture of a young man by a lake, carefree, wearing the same jacket, the same boots as the stranger, his smile bright, but hauntingly familiar. My breath caught, my heart stuttering. It was him, the man from the forest, untouched by time, as if he'd stepped from the past into my present. That's Devor, Ivana said, her voice heavy with sorrow. Your father, before he met. Your mother? He'd been dead for over a decade, yet I'd stood with him in the forest, his voice guiding me, keeping me from home, from death. He saved you, Marco, Dan said, his voice steady but heavy, cutting through the silence like the blade. If you'd come home with that rifle, you'd have walked into those burglars. You wouldn't be here. The words sank deep, anchoring me to a new truth, a lifeline in the chaos of my grief. Had my father crossed the veil of death to protect me, his voice a whisper from beyond? Or was it a cruel trick of fate, a hunter who looked like him, knew him, appearing at the exact moment to keep me safe? Feel his presence, Marco. He's still with you. The thought was a beacon, pulling me from the abyss, but it didn't erase the questions, the doubts that lingered like shadows. Years have passed and I'm alive, married, planning for children. My life a fragile thread woven from loss and survival. The forest still calls, its paths as familiar as my own heartbeat. But I hunt for joy now, not necessity. When I teach my kids to hunt, I'll tell them of the stranger, of the night the forest held me back to save me, of the man who might have been my father watching from beyond. Science calls it impossible, says grief paints illusions, but my heart knows what I saw, what I felt. The man in the forest was real, his voice a whisper from the other side, guiding me through the darkness to the life I have now. I carry him, with me in every step, every breath, a shadow that never fades, a love that endures beyond the grave. I was Marko Petrovic, 17, a boy shaped by the rugged heart of a Croatian village, where the Dinaric Alps stood like silent sentinels, their peaks swallowing the stars. My life was tethered to Baka, my grandmother, the only light left after my parents drowned in the Adriatic's embrace when I was 2. That evening, I stepped into the woods with my rifle, driven by a desperate vow to bring home game to ease her weary soul. But the forest held a stranger, a man whose dark eyes pierced my reality, unraveling everything I thought I knew, leaving me lost in a nightmare where love and loss collided. Our village clung to the forest's edge, a scattering of stone houses, worn by time, their roofs sagging under the weight of endless winters. Baka and I lived in a modest home, its walls steeped in the scent of aged wood and her quiet strength. My parents were ghosts, their faces trapped in faded photographs on a shelf beside our flickering television, their smiles a distant ache. Baka was my world, her hands rough from the textile factory, each needle prick scar a testament to her love. She worked tirelessly, her fingers etched with tiny wounds, yet she never spoke of her pain. At night, she'd hum old Slavic songs, her eyes crinkling as she served soup, her voice soft as she shared stories of our family's past, tales of my father, Devor, and his love for the woods. Those moments were my haven, a fragile warmth, in a world too vast, too cold, where her smile was the only thing that kept me whole. Hunting was my purpose, my way to ease her burden. At 14, I learned to set snares, catching rabbits under the forest's watchful gaze, their soft fur warm in my hands. By 16, I'd saved enough for a Zastava M70, its scratched barrel my pride, my companion through the silent trails. The woods were my sanctuary, their silence a mirror for my thoughts, their shadows a canvas for my fears. I knew every path, every whisper of leaves, every glade where deer paused to drink, their eyes glinting in the dusk. The forest was my ally, its rhythm as familiar as my heartbeat, its scent of pine and damp earth a call to action. But that fall evening, the air grew heavy, the trees leaning closer as if guarding a secret that would shatter my world. That morning, Baka's face was etched with exhaustion. Her shoulders slumped as she packed a meager lunch, bread and beans, no coffee to warm her bones. Her eyes, heavy with unspoken burdens, met mine, and guilt pierced me like a blade, sharp and unrelenting. "I'll bring something good for dinner," I promised, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. She kissed my forehead, her lips cool against my skin, and left for the factory, her step slow, burdened. School was a blur, my mind lost in the forest's promise of redemption, my heart set on sparing Baka the weight of another sparse meal. When the bell rang, I raced home, grabbed my rifle, and slipped into the woods, the cold air biting my cheeks, the ground soft under my boots. The forest breathed around me, its scent of moss and frost a living thing, urging me deeper into its heart, where shadows whispered secrets I wasn't ready to hear. Hours passed with no quarry. A deer flickered in the distance, its form swallowed by the trees before I could aim. The sun bled into the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and shadow, and desperation clawed at my heart like a beast. I couldn't face Baka's disappointment, Not after her grueling weeks at the factory, her hands trembling as she sewed. I pushed toward a clearing near the old logging road, a place where animals sometimes grazed, their hoofprints etched in the soft earth. The new moon cloaked the forest in darkness, the stars mere pinpricks above, their light too weak to guide me. I should have turned back, but a stubborn fire burned within, whispering that one more step could change everything, could bring a smile to Baka's tired face. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, steady, unafraid, breaking the forest's hush, each step a pulse in the silence. I spun, rifle raised, heart hammering against my ribs. A man stood 10 meters away, his silhouette sharp against the faint starlight, his presence a fracture in the forest's rhythm. Average height, dark hair, a jacket and boots that blended into the night. His face stirred a memory like a dream half forgotten, a shadow from a photograph I couldn't place. His eyes were pools of darkness, drinking the light, pulling me into a trance where time dissolved. "Good evening," he said, his voice warm, almost too gentle, cutting through the silence like a blade through silk. "A fine night for a hunt, isn't it?" I lowered my rifle slightly, finger hovering near the trigger, suspicion coiling in my gut. Strangers were rare here, trust even rarer. "Yes," I said, my voice taut, barely masking my unease. "No, luck today," he smiled, stepping closer, his eyes glinting like polished obsidian. "Sometimes the forest hides its treasures. Marko Petrovic, Anna's grandson." My blood froze, my breath catching in my throat. How did he know my name? Baka's name? The village was small, faces familiar, but his was not among them. "Who are you?" I demanded, gripping the rifle tighter, its weight grounding me. "Oh, I know many around here," he said, his tone light, almost playful, yet heavy with something unspoken. "I hunted these woods long ago. Name's Vuka. Some called me that." The name tugged at a memory. A story Baka told of old nicknames, of wolves and trackers, but it didn't fit. His gaze was a chain, binding me, pulling me into a haze where the forest's whispers grew louder, urging me to listen, to stay. He asked about my life, school, my dreams, my plans, each question weaving a thread of familiarity that disarmed me, softening my guard. His words were a spell, soft yet commanding, drawing me into a loop where I spilled my soul, my hopes, my fears. I spoke of mechanical engineering, a scholarship to Zagreb, dreams I rarely dared voice, my voice trembling with the weight of them. He nodded, as if he'd always known, his eyes never leaving mine. "Your grandmother must be proud," he said, his voice warm but tinged with sorrow. "Anna always valued education, wanted it for your father, too." My heart lurched, a cold dread settling in my bones. How did he know my father? "You knew him?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, the forest seeming to hold its breath. "Yes," he said, his smile heavy with loss. "We were close." His words anchored a memory I didn't own, a bond I couldn't grasp, and the trees seemed to lean closer, their shadows whispering truths I wasn't ready to face. We spoke for what felt like hours, though the stars barely shifted, time slipping through my fingers like water. His questions wove a tapestry of my life, Baka's garden, its roses heavy with dew, our patched-up house, its walls creaking with stories, traditions only we kept, like the way Baka lit a candle for my parents each spring. I answered, caught, in a strange compulsion, his voice holding me captive, each word a thread pulling me deeper into the forest's heart. The darkness deepened, the air thick with the scent of pine and something older, something ancient. I snapped out of the haze, a jolt of panic reminding me of Baka waiting at home. her tired eyes expecting me. "I have to go," I said, irritation flaring at the lost time, my failure to hunt. His face flickered with pain, a shadow crossing his eyes. "Of course," he said softly, his voice a caress and a warning. "Family is everything, Marco. Remember that." His sincerity was a blade, cutting through my resolve, leaving me unsteady, the forest's whispers echoing his words. I turned, rifle heavy in my hands, and hurried home, guilt gnawing at me for failing Baca, for wasting time with a stranger. The path was dark, the trees closing in, their branches like fingers brushing my shoulders. The forest felt alive, its breath cold against my neck, urging me to run, to escape. I reached our house, and my heart stopped. Baca's blue Zastava sat outside, but the front door hung open, swaying in the breeze. A silent scream in the night. Broken windows gleamed in the starlight, glass scattered like shattered dreams across the yard, each shard reflecting my fear. My rifle fell, its weight forgotten, and I ran, my voice tearing through the silence. "Baca!" I called, raw, desperate. A plea to a world already broken, my footsteps pounding against the earth. Inside, chaos reigned. Furniture toppled, drawers spilled, the television in ruins, its screen a jagged wound. And there, in the living room, lay Baca, her purse emptied, blood pooling beneath her, staining the carpet we'd scrubbed together under last Sunday's sun. 3 bullet wounds scarred her chest and stomach, her eyes open, staring into a void I couldn't reach. The air was thick with the coppery scent of her blood, the room spinning as grief crashed over me, a tidal wave drowning my senses. I sank, beside her, hands trembling over her still form, her skin cold, her warmth gone. The world dissolved into a haze, each breath a struggle, my heart screaming against the truth that she was gone, taken while I lingered in the forest. The hours that followed were a nightmare, blurred by tears and voices. Neighbors came, drawn by my cries, their faces pale in the starlight. Police arrived, their questions relentless, piercing the fog of my pain. I answered in a daze, my voice hollow, repeating truths like a broken hymn. I was hunting, saw no one suspicious, we had no enemies. They called it a burglary gone wrong. Baca had surprised intruders who shot her and fled with her jewelry, and our meager cash box. The loss was a chasm, devouring all I knew, leaving only guilt and shadows that clung to me like damp earth. I stayed with the Kovacs family, kind neighbors who offered shelter, then moved to Zagreb with Ivana and Dan, my mother's cousin and her husband. They were gentle, welcoming, but they weren't Baca. I lived in a fog, guilt my only companion, whispering that if I hadn't lingered with Vuka, I might have saved her, might have held her hand as she slipped away. 6 months later, a family dinner broke through my silence. Ivana's stories of my father divorce stirred a spark, pulling me from the darkness, her voice a thread to a past I barely knew. I spoke of Vuka, his eerie knowledge of our family, Baca's garden, our traditions, my father's dreams. The room stilled, Ivana's, coffee cup trembling in her hand, her eyes wide with something like fear. "Vuka was your father's nickname," she said, her voice barely audible. "Only family used it when he was young, for his skill tracking animals, like a wolf." She showed me a photograph, a young man by a lake, dark hair, dark eyes, in the same jacket as Vuka, his smile carefree, untouched by the tragedy that would claim him. It was my father, Devor, from before he met my mother. The truth crashed over me like a storm, my heart pounding. The man I met couldn't be my father, dead for over a decade. Yet his face, his words, were undeniable, etched into my soul. Dan's voice cut through the silence, steady and sure. He saved your life, Marco. If you'd come home during that burglary, you'd be gone too. The thought was a lifeline and a wound, tearing open my grief, my guilt, my questions. Had my father crossed the veil to protect me, his voice reaching from beyond to keep me safe? Or was it a cruel twist of fate, a hunter who knew too much, appearing at the precise moment to hold me back? The forest's whispers haunted me, a dreamlike truth I couldn't unravel, a melody of love and dread that lingered in my bones. Science called it grief, a trick of the mind, but my heart knew what I'd seen, felt the weight of his eyes, his words. I'm alive now, married, planning for children, unless war comes to shatter this fragile peace. I hunt less, but when I do, I'll teach my children, hoping to be there for them as my father was for me, in ways I'll never fully grasp. The forest still calls, its voice a blend of love and terror, a reminder that some truths linger beyond the veil, waiting in the shadows for those who listen. The creek sang to me that summer evening, its waters whispering secrets no child should hear, pulling me deeper into the twilight's embrace. I was 8 years old, a city boy from Belgrade, standing on a dusty path in a Serbian village, the air thick with the scent of wildflowers and danger. It was 2004, and my parents had sent me to my grandparents' home, believing the country air would soothe my asthma. But the village had its own rules, its own shadows, and I was about to learn them the hard way. Something waited by the creek, something ancient, something hungry, and it knew my name. Every summer, I left the concrete jungle of Belgrade for my grandparents' village, a place where time seemed to stand still, where houses sagged under the weight of years and the forest pressed close, watching. My grandparents' home smelled of wood smoke and lavender, its walls adorned with faded icons that stared down with solemn eyes. Grandpa was a man of few words, his face carved from years of toil, but his warnings were clear. Don't go near. The creek after the church bells ring, he'd say, his voice low, as if the words themselves could summon something dark. I'd nod, but city kids like me didn't believe in monsters, not the kind that hid in shadows anyway. Our monsters wore hoods, carried bats, lurked in alleys. Village tales of the Draco, a creature that hunted children who wandered alone, felt like bedtime stories, half believed, half mocked until they crept into my dreams. That day was etched in my memory, sharp as the July heat that clung to my skin. The village boys, their faces smudged with dirt, taunted me by the big willow tree, its branches drooping over the creek like a mourner's veil. They called me too small, too weak to climb its gnarled limbs. Prove them wrong, I told myself, my heart pounding with a child's stubborn pride. The other kids left for dinner, their laughter fading into the distance, leaving me alone with the tree and the creek's soft murmur. The air grew heavy, the mosquitoes buzzing like tiny warnings, and the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire and blood. Stay focused, keep climbing. I scrambled higher, my hands gripping rough bark, my lungs tight from asthma but defiant. I was no city weakling. I'd show them. The realization hit as the light faded. I'd stayed too long. Grandpa's warning echoed, a distant bell in my mind. The village was a good walk away, and my grandparents would be worried, their faces tight with fear. I jumped down from the willow, my sneakers sinking into the soft earth, and started along the creek path, the water glinting like a mirror under the dying sun. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. Hurry, get home before dark. The path wound through tall grass, the creek song growing softer, more sinister, like a lullaby twisted into a threat. Then I heard it, a cry, soft at first, like a baby lost in the dusk. My steps faltered, my heart stuttering. Why would a baby be out here so far from any house? The nearest farm was half a kilometer away, its lights faint in the distance. The crying grew louder, desperate, tugging at something deep inside me. A mix of pity and fear. "Hello," I called, my voice trembling, barely carrying over the water's murmur. "Are you hurt?" The moment the words left my lips, regret flooded me. The crying stopped, sharp and sudden, as if I'd broken a spell. Something moved in the bushes across the creek. Not a child, not a baby. Something else. My skin prickled, the air turning cold despite the summer heat. I stepped closer, my curiosity battling my fear, my sneakers sinking into the muddy bank. The movement stopped, the silence heavier than before, pressing against my chest. Then a new sound came, high and thin, like my own voice twisted into a mockery. "Hello," it called back. My exact tone, my exact words, but wrong, hollow, like a shadow-given voice. My blood ran cold, my hands sweating despite the chill. I backed away, my eyes locked on the bushes where something pale shifted, catching the last rays of sunlight. Yellow eyes gleamed, bright as coins, staring straight into me. My legs trembled, my asthma tightening my chest, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away. Then it screamed, a sound not human, not animal, but something from a place where nightmares are born. The sound tore through me, weakening my knees, turning my courage to ash. I ran, my feet pounding the path, the world blurring into streaks of shadow and starlight. The scream followed, shifting from left to right, as if the thing was circling me, playing with me. My lungs burned, each breath a struggle, but fear drove me forward. I tripped near the cemetery, my knee splitting open on a jagged rock, the pain sharp and real. Blood seeped through my jeans, warm and sticky, grounding me in the horror. I looked up, and there it was, standing on a grave marker 20 meters away. Its form wrong, impossible. A body like a dog's, but too thin, too long. Its limbs twisted, its face stretched, wolf-like yet not. Its mouth open too wide, filled with needle-sharp teeth. Those yellow eyes locked onto me, glowing with a hunger that wasn't just animal. It was knowing, ancient, cruel. This can't be real, I thought. But the pain in my knee, the smell of wet fur, the cold air biting my skin, they were real too. "Jewel?" The thing stepped down from the grave, its movements fluid yet jerky, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. I scrambled to my feet, my heart racing, my mind screaming to run. But the cemetery lay between me and home. The creek was too deep to cross, and going back meant facing it again. The sun was gone, the darkness swallowing everything, leaving only those eyes. It opened its mouth wider, a grotesque parody of a smile, and I braced for another scream. Then, the church bells rang, their deep toll cutting through the night like a blade. The creature flinched, its head snapping toward the sound, its eyes narrowing. It hesitated, then let out a low, frustrated whine, slinking back into the shadows between the graves, its form melting into the darkness. "Run now, don't look back." I seized the moment, sprinting past the cemetery, through the field, into the village, my lungs screaming, my knee bleeding, my heart pounding with terror and relief. I didn't stop until I reached my grandparents' house, its lights a beacon. In the night, Grandpa took one look at me, muddy, bloody, my face pale as death, and knew. His eyes held no surprise, only a quiet understanding, as if he'd seen this before. He pulled me inside, locked the door, and sprinkled salt on the windowsills, its grains glinting like tiny stars. He made me drink water laced with 3 drops of holy oil, its bitter taste grounding me, then cleaned my cut with alcohol, the sting pulling me back to reality. "Won't be staying out too late again, will you?" he said, his voice calm but heavy. Not a question, but a command. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak, my body trembling with the weight of what I'd seen. For 3 nights after, I heard it. A cry outside my window, faint at first like a baby, then shifting, becoming my own voice, calling my name in the dark. Each night it grew clearer, more like me, as if it was learning, adapting. Grandpa heard it too, his face grim as he sprinkled more salt. As he walked to the churchyard with holy water, his steps deliberate, his prayers low and fervent. On the 3rd night, he had the house blessed, the priest's chants filling the air with a warmth that pushed back the cold. The crying stopped, the air lighter, but the memory lingered, a scar on my soul. I never went back to that creek alone, never tested the darkness again. Now, as an adult, I carry that night with me, a shadow that never fades. Whenever I visit the country, whether my grandparents' village or elsewhere, I sprinkle salt on the windowsills, its grains a ritual, a shield against the things that wait in the dark. The Draco is real, not just a story, and it knows the names of those who wander too far. I believe the village tales now, the warnings passed down through generations, because I've seen what they warn against. Listen to the bells, stay in the light, and never answer the creek's call. Had she known what she was doing, or was she merely a victim like me? The house felt different now, its walls heavy with a presence I couldn't name, its silence a dreamlike hum that echoed her voice. In the end, I placed the stone in a wooden box from my great-aunt, setting it on the mantelpiece. "You can stay," I said aloud, my voice trembling in the quiet, "but this is your place now." Months passed and the stone still moved, kitchen table, bedside, windowsill, but less often. As if testing my resolve, its warmth a reminder of its hold. The misfortunes eased but never stopped. A spilled coffee on documents, a missed call from a client, my phone dying at the worst moment, each a small wound in my carefully rebuilt life. I adapted, backing up my work obsessively, leaving early for appointments, keeping extra supplies to guard against the curse's whims. The house was no longer just a house, its walls alive with a presence I couldn't shake, its shadows whispering of Pani Volova, of the less, of a truth I couldn't escape. I haven't dreamed of her again, but her gaze lingers in my mind, her milky eye a mirror of my own fears. Be careful who you help, I learned. For some gifts carry a weight you can't return, a curse that binds you to a reality where dreams and dread are one. The stone remains, its etched eye watching, a silent vow that I am never truly alone, never truly free. It began with a stone, smooth as a whispered secret, warm as a heartbeat stolen from the grave, pressed into my palm by an old woman whose clouded eye saw through the veil of my broken life. I was Magda, a woman shattered by divorce, seeking refuge in the forgotten town of Brezno, Slovakia, where my great-aunt's house stood like a monument to a past I barely remembered. I came to renovate, to sell, to claw my way back to Prague and a life untainted by failure. But that spring, under a sky heavy with rain and secrets, a single act of kindness bound me to a curse that wove itself into my days, blurring the line between dream and dread. The stone moved when I wasn't looking, whispering misfortune, its etched eye watching me from the shadows, pulling me into a nightmare where reality twisted into something unholy. Brezno was a quiet wound on the map, its streets a maze of gray buildings and cobblestones polished by centuries of footsteps. My great-aunt's house was a crumbling relic, its walls heavy with the scent of old plaster, damp wood, and faded dreams. After my divorce, The house was my lifeline, a chance to rebuild, to bury the pain of a marriage that had crumbled like ash in my hands. As an architect, I saw potential in its sagging beams, its cracked windows, each measurement a step toward freedom, a future where I could forget my ex-husband's voice, his betrayal still echoing in the quiet moments. I spoke enough Slovak to navigate the market, but my words were clumsy, my heart a fortress guarding against the pity in the townsfolk's eyes. They were kind but distant, their glances heavy with curiosity, as if they sensed the weight of my solitude, the fractures I carried within. That Tuesday after Easter, rain fell in soft sheets, cloaking Brezno in a silver haze that blurred the edges of the world. I wandered the market, my mind tangled in calculations for kitchen tiles, the damp air clinging to my skin like a second sorrow. At the potato stall, I saw her, an elderly woman thin as a wisp, struggling with bags that seemed to pull her toward the earth. Her left eye was clouded, a milky veil that seemed to peer beyond this world, her clothes patched but clean, carrying the faint scent of lavender and soil. When her bag tore, potatoes spilling across wet cobblestones like scattered hopes, I couldn't turn away, my heart stirred by a need to help, to connect. I hurried over, my Slovak halting but earnest. "Let me help you," I said, kneeling to gather the vegetables, their cold weight grounding me. She nodded, her good eye studying me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. Her gaze was a mirror, reflecting my loneliness, pulling me into a moment that felt both fleeting and eternal, real and unreal. We walked to her apartment, in a gray, brutalist block across the square, her bags heavy in my hands, the rain soaking through my coat. Each step was a reminder of my failures, the life I'd left behind, the weight of starting over. She asked about me, where I was from, why I came to Brezno if I was married. Her questions gentle but piercing, as if she saw the cracks in my soul. I answered, caught in a strange rhythm, her voice a soft command that drew out truths I'd buried deep. Her apartment was small but immaculate, folk embroideries hanging between faded photographs, the air thick with the scent of paprika, dried herbs, and something older, like the earth itself. On a shelf, a smooth oval stone sat alone on a doily, its surface etched with a curved line like a closed eye that watched without blinking. "Interesting," I said, drawn to its quiet presence, my fingers itching to touch it. Her expression shifted, fear, relief, or something I couldn't name. "Very old," she said, taking the stone in her palm, her fingers trembling slightly. "A gift." Then, with an urgency that chilled me, she pressed it into my hand. "For you. For helping an old woman. Good luck." The stone was warm, heavier than it looked, its surface smooth against my skin like a pulse trapped in stone. "Your turn now," she murmured, her words a whisper that lodged in my mind, a command that echoed long after I left. I thought she meant to pay it forward, a kind gesture, but the weight of her words clung to me, heavy as the rain. I slipped the stone into my coat, planning to discard it on the way home, its warmth unsettling like a hand resting on my heart. The rain grew heavier, the sky a bruised purple, urging me back to the house, its walls closing in like a cage. By evening I'd forgotten the stone, lost in renovation plans until I emptied my pockets and found it waiting, its eye-like etching glinting in the lamplight, a silent presence in the stillness. I placed it on my bookshelf between architecture magazines, its warmth lingering on my fingers, a quiet hum that disrupted the silence of the house. The next morning, the stone was on my kitchen counter. I frowned, my mind replaying the night, searching for a moment when I might have moved it, my thoughts clouded by memories of my ex-husband, the life I'd lost. I'd been distracted, haunted by failure, but I was certain I hadn't touched it. I returned it to the bookshelf, dismissing the unease that coiled in my gut. That day, my laptop crashed, wiping 3 days of kitchen designs, the backup files. Corrupted, each loss a needle piercing my heart. I wanted to scream, the frustration a mirror of my shattered marriage, the dreams I'd built now crumbling again. By noon, my contractor emailed, canceling until autumn for another job. His words, a blow I couldn't dodge. Small things, I told myself. Coincidences, but the air felt heavier, the house colder, as if it watched me with unseen eyes. That evening, the stone was on my dining table, its etched eye seeming to follow my every move, a silent accusation in the dim light. Over the next week, misfortune clung to me like damp cloth, each day a new wound. My washing machine leaked, flooding the floor, ruining expensive tiles, the water pooling like tears that refused to dry. My favorite mug cracked, its shards sharp against my fingers, a small betrayal that stung more than it should. A paper cut on my hand throbbed, refusing to heal, a constant reminder of my fragility. My sleep fractured, dreams slipping away upon waking, leaving only a vague dread, a sense of being watched by something just beyond my sight. The stone moved relentlessly, bookshelf to kitchen drawer, storage box to bedside table, bathroom sink, to windowsill, appearing where it pleased. Its presence a quiet mockery of my control. I'm losing my mind, I thought, clutching the stone. Its warmth a pulse against my palm, a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I stuffed it into my coat pocket and donated the coat to a charity shop. The volunteers' smile bright against my growing fear. That night the stone was on my pillow, its etched eye glinting in the moonlight, a silent vow that it would not leave me. The following Tuesday I returned to the market, desperate to find Pani Volova, to return the stone with some excuse, to free myself from its grip. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth, fresh bread, and the hum of the crowd, but her face was nowhere among them. At the vegetable stall I asked about her, my voice trembling. The vendor crossed herself, her eyes heavy with sorrow. Pani Volova died 2 days after Easter, she said, peacefully in her sleep after years of trouble. My heart stopped, the world tilting. Easter Monday was the day before I met her, before I carried her groceries, felt her gaze, held her stone. The truth was a cold blade. She was gone, and the stone was mine, its warmth a curse I couldn't escape. I stumbled home, the rain soaking through my clothes, each step heavier with dread. The stone in my pocket, a weight that pulled me toward something I couldn't name. I turned to the internet searching for answers. Haunted stones, Slavic, legends, anything to explain the madness. The word les appeared, a shadow from folklore, a curse of bad luck passed through objects. Its single eye a mark of misfortune that clung like a second skin. The stone matched too perfectly, its movements no coincidence, its etched eye, a silent witness to my unraveling. I sat in my kitchen, the stone by the sink, its gaze piercing, and whispered, "This is ridiculous," my voice shaking in the empty house. But doubt gnawed at me, the walls creaking as if agreeing, their shadows shifting in the dim light. I read about remedies, salt and bread by the door, a ritual to appease the curse. Feeling foolish, I placed a dish of salt and a slice of bread. By the entrance, the night air cold against my skin, the house holding its breath. By morning, the bread was gone, the salt scattered across the floor, and the stone sat on my bedside table, its presence louder than ever, a pulse in the silence. The Misfortunes continued, relentless but subtle, like a tide eroding my resolve. A pipe leaked, ruining my renovation work. The water seeping into the walls like a memory that wouldn't fade. A client canceled, their email a cold dismissal of my hopes. A cough lingered, dry and persistent, a guest that refused to leave. One night, I dreamed of Pani Volova, her milky eye watching from the foot of my bed, her good eye heavy with sorrow, as if she carried the weight of centuries. She nodded, as if passing a burden, her presence a shadow that lingered upon waking. I found the stone by my side, its warmth a quiet threat, its etched eye glinting in the dawn. I researched more, learning the lace could be transferred, but only willingly, to someone who wanted the object, whether they knew its curse or not. Donating it had failed. It returned unyielding, a chain I couldn't break. The thought of passing it made me sick. How could I curse another as Pani Volova had cursed me? I imagined her, weighed by years of misfortune, her patched clothes, a map of her struggles, her gift a desperate act to free herself. The cold wasn't just cold that night. It was a presence, seeping through the walls of dormitory 6, wrapping my room in a shroud of winter that no blanket could thaw. I was 19, a first-year medical student, lying in a narrow bed on the 3rd floor of an ancient red brick building in Eastern Europe, its walls heavy with centuries of secrets. The air carried a sharp antiseptic tang, a ghost of the building's past as a hospital, mingled with something older, sadder, like a sigh from the grave. I didn't know it then, but she was already there, watching from the shadows, her presence a whisper that would unravel my world, blurring the line between dream and dread. The university was a relic, its main campus a maze of stone spires and cobblestone paths, but dormitory 6 stood apart, isolated at the edge of the grounds, its red brick facade both grand and foreboding. Built in the 1800s, it had served as a hospital during the wars. Its 4 stories, etched with ornate stonework, now faded by time. My room, 312, was a corner unit, cramped and drafty, with 2 narrow windows that rattled in the wind, and a wardrobe that seemed to shift in the dark. My assigned roommate, Katya, never showed, having transferred to another school at the last minute, leaving me alone with the silence and the building's restless history. Feel the walls around you, I'd tell myself, anchoring my nerves to the solidity of the room, though the air always felt too heavy, too watchful. The first month was a whirlwind of lectures, anatomy labs, and late-night coffee runs, the chaos of university life drowning out the dorm's oddities. I made friends, joined study groups, and learned to navigate the campus's winding halls. But dormitory 6 had its own rhythm, one I couldn't ignore. The heating pipes groaned at odd hours, a low hum like a heartbeat pulsing through the walls. Footsteps echoed in the corridor late at night, when most students were asleep, their cadence too steady, too deliberate to be casual. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling's cracked plaster, telling myself it was just the building settling, just my imagination stirred by too many horror movies. But the cold was different, a presence that lingered, seeping into my bones, whispering of things unseen. One night I woke at 3:17 a.m., the numbers glowing red on my phone, my breath fogging in the air as if winter had invaded my room. The cold was sharp, unnatural, pressing against my skin like a warning. I reached for my blanket, my fingers numb when I saw her. A slender figure at my desk, her back to me, her light hair catching the faint starlight filtering through the window. She wore a pale blue uniform, crisp and outdated like something from a history book, her hand moving steadily as if writing on an invisible chart. My heart stopped, my mind scrambling for logic. A dream, a prank, anything but this. "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling, thinking another student had wandered in by mistake. She didn't turn, didn't pause, her presence heavy, tangible. Like a weight on my chest, I fumbled for the lamp, my fingers clumsy in the cold, and in the split second it took to flick the switch, she was gone. The desk chair was empty, the room still freezing. The air thick with a scent like antiseptic and lavender, sharp and haunting. I sat there, my breath shallow, my pulse racing, telling myself it was a waking dream, a trick of exhaustion from late-night studying. But the cold lingered for an hour, a silent witness to what I'd seen, and sleep didn't come again that night. I didn't tell anyone, not then. Medical students don't believe in ghosts. We dissect cadavers, memorize bones, cling to science, like a lifeline. But Dormitory 6 was teaching me that some truths lie beyond the scalpel. The signs grew harder to ignore, creeping into my days like shadows lengthening at dusk. Books on my shelf shifted. Their order changed when I returned from class, as if someone had browsed them in my absence. My desk chair turned slightly, facing the window, when I was certain I'd pushed it in. The cold came and went, always around. 3 a.m., a clockwork haunting that left me sleepless. My nerves frayed like old wires. I started noticing other oddities. My notes rearranged. A pen left uncapped on my desk. Small disturbances that felt personal, deliberate. Was I losing my mind, or was something watching, waiting? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on exams, on the tangible world. But the dorm had other plans, its secrets weaving a net around me. Then I met Mila in the communal kitchen. Her face, pale, dark circles under her eyes like smudged charcoal. She stood by the stove, steeping tea, her hands trembling slightly, as if the dorm had drained her too. "Not sleeping well?" I asked, stirring my own tea, the steam curling in the dim light, the kitchen's fluorescent hum of faint comfort. "This building," she muttered, her voice low as if afraid the walls were listening. "Do you ever feel watched?" Her words hit like a spark, igniting my own fears, pulling me into her orbit. I thought of the figure at my desk, the cold that wasn't just cold. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice cautious, my heart pounding. She hesitated, her eyes darting, to the door, then spoke, her words tumbling out like a confession. "When I study late, I feel someone behind me reading over my shoulder. My room gets so cold, but the hallway's fine. It's like I'm not alone." I froze, my tea forgotten, the kitchen shrinking, the shadows deepening. I admitted my own experience. The figure, the cold, the lavender scent. And we sat there, two strangers bound by fear, our voices low, our words a fragile bridge across the unknown. "Have you told anyone?" I asked, hoping for a solution, a way out. Mila laughed, bitter and tired. "What would I say? That I have ghost stories? They'd think I'm dodging the bathroom issues." The third floor's communal bathroom, with its weak water pressure and fickle heat, was a running joke. But this was no joke. This was real. The next encounter came with Pavle, a quiet computer science student from room 309, his face a mask. Fear when I found him in the hallway one night. He sat against the wall staring at his door, his eyes wide, his hands trembling as if he'd seen death itself. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence, startling him. He jumped, then looked at me, his gaze haunted. "Do you ever see her?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "The nurse or whatever she is?" My heart stopped, the air growing colder, as if his words had summoned her presence. He told me his story, his voice shaking, coding at 2 a.m., stepping out for water, returning to find a woman in a blue uniform by his computer, her face impossibly sad, her features old-fashioned like a sepia photograph come to life. She turned and then she walked into the wall, vanished, he said, his eyes darting to his door as if she might reappear. I shared my own encounter, the words spilling out, a relief and a burden. We sat there, the hallway a tunnel of fear, the air heavy with the weight of our shared truth. Pavle refused to return to his room, opting for the common room's couch, and I couldn't blame him. Word spread like wildfire among the third-floor residents, a quiet current of whispers and confessions. Irena in 301 heard drawers opening and closing in her wardrobe at night, the sound too deliberate to be rodents. Sasha in 315 found his textbooks, open to pages he hadn't touched, their corners creased as if read by invisible hands. Daniel in 320 swore his shower turned ice-cold exactly 17 minutes after starting, every time, like a timer set by something unseen. We were a community of the haunted, our fear binding us, our stories weaving a tapestry of dread. We started researching, driven by a need to understand, to name the thing that haunted us. The university archives were a maze of dust and bureaucracy, offering only blueprints and renovation records, dry facts that mocked our fear. Then Mila found it, a newspaper clipping, yellowed and brittle, tucked into an old ledger, its words a window into the past. The article told of Katerina, a young nurse who worked the night shift on the third floor during the building's hospital days. She died in 1919, struck down by a typhus outbreak, tending patients until she collapsed at her station, her dedication a quiet tragedy that echoed through time. The clipping described her routine, checking patients at 3 a.m., her blue uniform, a familiar sight, her presence a comfort in the wards. Her story wasn't frightening but sad, a weight that settled in my chest, making the cold feel like her touch. The discovery changed us, softening the fear into something heavier, more human. Katerina wasn't a monster, just a soul caught in her duty, her sadness a quiet hum in the dorm's walls. Some students left offerings, pens, notebooks, cups of tea left to cool by morning, small gestures of respect for a woman still working. Her rounds. Others fled, too scared to stay, sleeping on friends' couches or begging for room transfers, their footsteps echoing in the halls like a retreat. I stayed, drawn to her, to the mystery of a soul that lingered, watching over us. The cold came every night, the lavender scent a constant companion, and I began to wonder if she saw us as her patients, her responsibility unbroken by death. Most vivid encounter came during finals week, the stress of exams fraying my nerves like old thread. I was studying late, my desk lamp flickering when the temperature plummeted, the cold wrapping around me like a second skin. I didn't turn, didn't dare, but I felt her, Katerina, standing beside me, her presence heavy, tangible, a weight on my soul. The air carried that antiseptic lavender scent, sharp and real, and from the corner of my eye, I saw her blue uniform, fading at the edges like a memory dissolving. "I'm just trying to study," I said softly, my voice steady, despite my racing heart, "like you're trying to work." For nearly an hour I kept reading, highlighting notes, and she stayed, a silent companion, her sadness a quiet hum in the room. When I finally turned, she was gone, but not abruptly. I caught the last flicker of her uniform, like a dream fading at dawn. I wasn't afraid, not then, only sad, as if I'd shared a moment with someone lost to time. After winter break, I requested a room transfer, not out of fear but exhaustion. The cold, the sleepless nights, the constant weight of her presence, they wore me down like a stone smoothed by a river. I moved to dormitory 3, first floor, where the air was warm, the silence normal, the world untouched by ghosts. But Katerina stayed with me, not as a haunting but a memory, a reminder of duty and loss. I think of her sometimes, when the air grows cold or the clock nears 3 a.m., and I wonder if she's still there, walking the halls, checking on a new generation. Students, her sadness a quiet echo in the dark. She wasn't a monster, just a soul caught in her own endless night. And I hope she finds peace, somewhere beyond the walls of dormitory 6. In the Appalachian Mountains, the night doesn't just fall, it consumes, wrapping the world in a darkness so deep it feels like the earth itself is holding its breath. I was 8 years old, huddled beneath a quilt too thin to keep out the eye, chill, in a house that clung to the edge of a hollow like a memory the mountains forgot. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, heavy with secrets no one dared name. My name is Samantha C., and I grew up in a place where the trees whispered warnings, where shadows moved when you weren't looking, where every creak of the floorboards felt like a question you didn't want answered. That night, something found me, not with eyes, not with claws, but with a sound that clawed its way into my soul. It was the Appalachian howler, and it knew I was there. Our home was a weathered outpost at the end of a dirt road, more mud than gravel, twisting through a hollow so remote the sun seemed to hesitate before rising. The forest pressed close, its branches scraping the walls like fingers testing for weakness, its roots curling beneath the foundation as if claiming the house as its own. My mother left when I was 4, her face a fading sketch in my mind like a drawing smudged by time. My father was a ghost, his name absent even from my birth certificate, a void I never tried to fill. It was my grandparents who raised me, their lives a tapestry of hardship and quiet love. Grandpa, his hands rough, from years in the coal mines, worked until his lungs betrayed him, then took odd jobs, mending fences, hauling logs, anything to keep food on the table. Grandma tended a garden behind the house, her fingers stained with the earth's blood, coaxing beans, tomatoes, and squash from the rocky soil, canning them for winters that felt endless. We survived on his disability checks and the game he hunted. Rabbits, deer, the rare wild turkey when luck smiled. Grandpa was a storyteller, his voice a low rumble that could make the ordinary feel alive with mystery. By the wood stove, its flames casting shadows that danced like spirits on the walls, he'd sit me on his knee and weave tales of the mountains. Some were about the Cherokee, their presence still lingering in the roots and ridges, their voices carried on the wind through the hollows. Others spoke of feuds, families bound by blood and torn by betrayal, their grudges etched into the land like scars. But the story he told with a fire in his eyes, the one that made my heart pound, was about the Appalachian howler. It's older than these hills, he'd say, his voice dropping to a near whisper, and it'll outlast us all. He described a beast that defied nature, neither bear nor wolf but something greater, its fur matted with the weight of centuries, its eyes glowing like embers in a dying fire. Its cry, he said, wasn't just sound. It was a force, a warning that could stop your heart, a call that reached into your bones and held you there. Listen close, Samantha, he'd urge, his calloused hand gripping mine. As long as it's calling, you're safe. But when the silence falls, he'd pause, letting the quiet fill the room, the firelight flickering in his eyes. That's when it's found you. Those stories were my childhood, thrilling and terrifying, like a secret shared in the dark. They sent shivers down my spine, the kind that made you pull the quilt tighter but beg for more. Yet there was something in Grandpa's gaze, a shadow of memory, a glint of fear, that made me wonder if he'd faced the howler himself. He'd told me once, late at night when Grandma was asleep, of a time he was hunting as a young man, deep in the hollows where the trees grew too close. He'd heard a sound, he said, not like any animal, a wail that made his rifle feel useless in his hands. He never saw it, but he felt it, watching, waiting, just beyond the tree line. Some things don't need to be seen to be real, he'd said, his voice heavy with a truth I was too young to grasp. On nights when the moon vanished, swallowed by a sky black as coal dust, my grandparents changed. Grandma, steady as the earth, would move from door to window, checking locks with a ritual's precision, her fingers lingering on the deadbolt as if it could hold back more than the wind. Grandpa would stack firewood high, far more than we needed, his movements sharp, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the glass. No sense taking chances, Grandma would say if I asked, her voice tight, her smile a mask hiding something deeper. Those nights they'd insist I be inside before the sun dipped below the ridge, curtains drawn, the house sealed like a fortress against a threat they wouldn't name. I was 8 when the howler came for us. It was late October, the air sharp with the promise of winter, the trees stripped bare, their branches clawing at a sky without stars or moon. I lay in bed, not quite asleep, the faint glow of my Batman nightlight casting shapes across the ceiling. Shapes that seemed to shift, to watch me when I blinked. The house was still, save for the groan of old wood settling and the distant hum of the wind through the hollow. Then it came, a sound so low it seemed to rise from the earth's core, a rumble that grew into a jagged wail like a voice torn apart and stitched back wrong. It wasn't a sound you could mistake. Not a wolf's cry, not a coyote's call, but something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world or any other. It clawed at my skin, raising goosebumps, and I was out of bed before my mind could catch up, my bare feet cold against the floorboards as I ran to my grandparents' room, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. They were awake, as if they'd been waiting for it. Grandma sat on the edge of the bed, her robe pulled tight around her thin frame, her face pale in the dim light of a single lamp, its glow barely touching the shadows. Grandpa stood by the window, one hand parting the curtain, his silhouette rigid, his breath fogging the glass. "Stay quiet, Samantha," Grandma said, her arms opening to pull me close. I pressed my face into her shoulder, her scent of lavender and soap a fragile anchor in the storm of my fear. But her body was tense, her heartbeat racing against my cheek. "Is it the howler?" I whispered, my voice trembling, barely audible. She didn't answer, just smoothed my hair, her fingers shaking, betraying the calm she tried to project. Grandpa turned from the window and I saw it, fear, stark and unhidden, etching lines deeper into his weathered face. He knelt before me, his hands heavy on my shoulders, his eyes searching mine. "I'm gonna sit in the living room for a bit," he said, his voice steady but his gaze unsteady like a man staring into a void. "You stay with Grandma, you hear?" I nodded, and he pressed a kiss to my forehead, a fleeting warmth in the cold, before leaving the room. He returned moments later, the old double-barrel shotgun in his hands, the one that hung above the fireplace, more relic than weapon. I'd never seen him hold it with such purpose, his knuckles white around the grip, his shoulders squared as if bracing for a fight. Grandma kept me in their room, reading from a worn book of fairy tales, her voice soft but fraying at the edges, stumbling over words she knew by heart. We played Yahtzee, the dice clattering in the cup, but her eyes kept drifting to the window, her hand pausing mid-roll, her breath catching with each swell of the sound outside. The howling didn't stop. It moved, circling the house, sometimes so close I felt it in my bones, as if it were pacing just beyond the walls, its claws scraping the earth, its eyes searching for a way in. Other times it faded to the ridge above our hollow, only to return, louder, sharper, a chorus of broken voices woven together, each note a thread in a tapestry of dread. Each swell of sound made Grandma's hand tighten on mine, her breath hitching, her stories faltering. I tried to focus on the game, on the familiar words of Hansel and Gretel, but the sound was everywhere, seeping into my mind, painting visions of a beast lurking in the dark, its fur matted, its eyes glowing, its presence a weight I couldn't shake. Grandma, perhaps to calm me or herself, told a story within a story, one she'd kept hidden until that night. When I was your age, she began, her voice low, her eyes distant. I heard it too. She spoke of a night much like this one, her own father standing guard with a rifle, her mother praying in the corner, their small house trembling under the weight of that same unnatural cry. They'd found tracks the next morning, she said. Too large for a bear, too deep for a wolf, circling their barn like a predator marking its territory. We never spoke of it after, she said, her voice heavy with memory. But I knew it was real. She told me of a neighbor, old Mr. Calhoun, who'd sworn he saw the howler once, a shadow taller than a man, moving through the fog, its eyes like twin fires. He'd never hunted in that hollow again, she said, and neither had her father. Her words wove the howler into something more than a tale, more than a sound. It was a presence, a thing that had watched her family as it now watched ours, a legacy of fear passed down through the mountains. Dawn came slowly, the sky lightening to a pale gray, and the howling faded, as if the light itself had driven it back into the shadows. I found Grandpa asleep in his armchair, the shotgun across his lap, his face carved with exhaustion, his hand still gripping the weapon as if it could protect us from what lingered beyond the walls. Grandma made pancakes, her hand steady again, the kitchen warm with the scent of butter and syrup, a fragile normalcy, but neither spoke of the night before. When I tried to ask, Grandma cut me off. Some things we don't talk about in the daylight, dear. Her words were gentle, but final. A door slammed shut on questions I was too afraid to push. From that day, I tracked the moon's phases with a calendar I kept hidden under my bed, circling the new moon in red ink, a ritual born of fear that became as natural as breathing. I made sure to be inside before dark on those nights. The memory of that sound, a weight in my chest, a shadow that followed me through the years. Time moved on, as it does, and the mountains took Grandpa when I was 11. A stroke stole him in the night, his stories left to echo in my mind, their edges fraying without his voice to hold them together. Grandma paid off the house with insurance money, living on Social Security and her garden, her hands still stained with the earth's life. The howler didn't return, and part of me began to doubt it ever had. Maybe it was a mountain lion, I told myself, or a bear, twisted by a child's fear and Grandpa's tales. The rational part of my mind clung to that explanation. But the mountains never let you forget they held secrets older than reason, truths buried in the roots and ridges. I was 13, caught in that liminal space between child and teenager, when the howler came back. It was spring break, the air soft with the scent of blooming dogwoods, the forest alive with the hum of new life, birds calling, streams murmuring, the world waking from winter's grip. Tammy, my friend from town, was staying over, her eyes bright with the thrill of our wilderness compared to her neatly trimmed neighborhood, where houses stood shoulder to shoulder. She loved our place, called it an adventure, a escape from her world of sidewalks and streetlights. We spent the day wandering the woods behind the house, following the creek, our laughter ringing through the trees as we debated Dylan, a boy, from school. Did his new haircut make him look like Leonardo DiCaprio, or was he just trying too hard? His smile, his walk, the way he leaned against his locker. We dissected it all, our voices carrying over the water's gentle ripple. Hours slipped away, the light shifting, shadows stretching long and thin across the forest floor, their edges sharp as knives. "We need to go back," I said, brushing dirt from my jeans, a cold unease curling in my gut like a warning I couldn't ignore. Tammy squinted at the sky, still bright through the canopy, the sun a pale gold above the ridge. "It's not that late," she teased, rolling her eyes, her voice light with the confidence of someone who'd never heard the howler. But I knew the calendar, knew the new moon was coming, knew the forest wasn't safe when the sky went dark. We started back, still talking, still laughing, but my ears were straining, listening for something I couldn't name, a sound I both dreaded and doubted. Then it came, a low, guttural rumble rising into a wail that tore through the air like a blade through flesh. It was the same jagged, unnatural cry from 5 years ago, the kind that didn't belong to any creature of this earth, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping the forest in its grip. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath catching in my throat, my hands trembling as I grabbed Tammy's arm. "We need to run," I said, my voice sharp with panic, cutting through her laughter. "Right now." She shook me off, her eyes dancing with amusement, thinking I was being dramatic. "It's just some animal, probably a cougar," she said, tilting her head to listen. But the sound came again, closer, sharper, and I felt it. A presence heavy and watchful, pressing against the air, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. "That's not a cougar," I said, my voice breaking, my mind caught between fear and doubt. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was just a story, but the cry swelled and I knew. We walked faster, Tammy still joking, her voice a thin shield against the growing dread. I was listening, comparing the sound to the memory burned into me, replaying Grandpa's words in my head. Was it the same? Had I built it up into something it wasn't? We were nearly out of the woods, the house's yellow light glowing through the trees like a beacon, when the howling stopped. The silence was a weight, crushing, unnatural. The forest held its breath. No birds, no rustling leaves, just a void where life should be. A stillness that felt like the world was waiting for something to strike. "Tammy, run," I whispered, my voice barely audible, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. She heard the fear in me this time, saw it in my eyes, and we broke into a jog. The path uneven, roots snagging at our feet, the air thick with the scent of pine and panic. 50 yards later, something landed behind us. A heavy impact that shook the ground, vibrating through my bones, sending a jolt of terror up my spine. We froze, then turned, the fading light barely piercing the trees, the shadows twisting into shapes that didn't belong. Something was there, breathing, deep and deliberate, like it was tasting our fear. Its presence a weight in the air, a promise of something ancient and hungry. "Run," I said again, my voice a desperate plea, and we sprinted, branches snapping. Underfoot, the house's light a lifeline in the growing dark. A sharp crack split the air, bark exploding from a tree just feet away, the sound like a whip against my nerves. I screamed, my mind racing with thoughts of a weapon, a hunter, something worse, something not human. Then I saw her. Grandma standing in the yard, Grandpa's shotgun in her hands, her face pale but fierce, her eyes burning with a resolve I'd never seen. "To the house now," she shouted. her voice a lifeline cutting through the panic, pulling us forward. We ran, legs burning, hearts pounding, the ground blurring beneath us until we reached the porch. Grandma shoved us inside, slamming the door, the deadbolt clicking into place with a finality that echoed in my chest. "What were you thinking?" she demanded, her hands trembling as she leaned the gun against the wall, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with a fear she couldn't hide. "Being out this late, tonight of all nights?" I gasped, trying to catch my breath, my lungs burning, my mind spinning. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was the new moon," I said, my voice shaking, the weight of my mistake crashing down. Her eyes softened, but the fear lingered, etched into the lines of her face, her hands still trembling as she reached for us. "You're safe now," she said, her voice steadying, but the words felt fragile, like a promise that could break. "That's what matters." Tammy, wide-eyed and shaken, her face pale in the dim light of the kitchen, looked between us, her hands clutching the edge of the table. "What was that?" she asked, her voice small, her usual bravado gone. Grandma sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of years had settled on her all at once. "Let's sit somewhere comfortable," she said, her voice soft but heavy. "I'll make hot chocolate." We ended up in her bedroom, the same room where I'd hidden 5 years ago, the air warm with the scent of cocoa, the faint creak of her rocking chair, a steady rhythm against the chaos of the night. She brought mugs, steam curling upward like spirits rising from the earth, and sat, her hands wrapped around her own cup, her eyes meeting mine with a weight I couldn't name. "What did your grandpa tell you about the howler?" she asked, her voice low, her gaze steady but haunted. I recounted his story, the words spilling out like a confession. The beast, the new moon, the cry that warned, the silence that hunted. I told her how he described its eyes, its size, the way it moved like nothing natural, how its presence lingered in the air long after its cry faded. Tammy listened, her hands tight around her mug, her face pale, her eyes darting to the window, as if expecting to see something there. "That's what was chasing us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, her bravado shattered. Grandma nodded, her gaze distant, lost in memory. "I've lived here my whole life, and I've only seen it twice," she said. "Once, when I was your age, and tonight." "You saw it?" I asked, my heart racing, my mind struggling to hold on to her words. She nodded, her eyes clouded with the weight of years. "Just a glimpse as you girls broke from the trees," she said, her voice low, her hands tightening around her mug. "It was big, covered in hair, moving wrong, not like any animal should." She described firing the shotgun, her hands shaking, as she aimed into the dark, missing but scaring it off, her heart pounding with the fear of nearly hitting us. She told us of her own encounter decades ago, when she was a girl, running home from a neighbor's house at dusk, the air heavy with the scent of rain, the forest alive with a sound that wasn't right, a wail that made her father grab his rifle and her mother fall to her knees in prayer. "We found tracks the next morning," she said, "circling our barn, too large for a bear, too deep for a wolf." She spoke of old Mr. Calhoun, a neighbor who'd seen it years before. A shadow. In the fog, its eyes like fire, its shape too tall, too fast. "He never hunted that hollow again," she said, "and neither did my father." Her story wove into Grandpa's, a tapestry of fear passed down through generations, each thread a warning, each memory a scar. Within an hour, the howling started again, circling our property, pacing, watching. It was distant at first, a low rumble from the ridge, then closer, sharp and jagged, then far again, as if the beast were playing with us, testing the edges of our safety. We stayed up, playing Yahtzee, sipping cocoa, pretending we weren't, listening to the sound that seemed to know us, to call our names. The dice rattled in the cup, but my hands shook, my eyes darting to the window, the curtains drawn tight but not tight enough to keep out the fear. Tammy tried to joke, to lighten the mood, but her voice was thin, her laughter forced, her eyes wide with the same dread I felt. Grandma kept the game going, her voice steady, but her hands betrayed her, trembling as she poured more cocoa as she glanced at the door. The howling moved, circling, never settling, a reminder that we were safe but only for now, only until the next new moon. Tammy left the next morning, her parents picking her up in their old pickup, the engine rumbling as they pulled into the yard. "That was the most exciting sleepover ever," she whispered, grinning despite the fear, her eyes bright with the thrill of survival. "Don't tell anyone," I begged, my voice low, my heart still racing. "They'll think we're crazy." She nodded, her grin widening. "Our secret," she said, "but I'm coming back, just not on a new moon." Grandma watched her go, her face unreadable, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Later, she set a new rule. No going outside after 4 p.m. on new moon days, no exceptions. I never questioned it, never pushed back. The memory of that night too raw, too real. Even now, years later, I check the moon's phases before making plans. The habit a scar on my soul, a ritual as vital as breathing. I moved to the city after high school, trading the mountains for concrete and noise. But when I visit the old house, driving up that winding road, the trees leaning in too close, I watch them, day or night, waiting for a sound that never comes, but never leaves me. The howler is still out there, in the dark, in the silence, waiting for the next new moon, waiting for someone to listen. My wife and I, we thought we knew the Appalachian Mountains like the back of our hands, their winding trails, the way the wind hums through gnarled pines, the rhythm of deer season pulsing in our blood. We were hunters, raised in rural Virginia, where the mountains were as much family as the people we loved. But in those woods, on 2 November mornings 5 years apart, we met something that didn't belong in this world, or any world. A creature with leathery wings, a metallic scream that tore through your soul, and eyes that seemed to know your every fear. They call it the snaily gaster, a nightmare woven into the fabric of these mountains for centuries. Let me take you back to the first time it hunted us, when the forest turned against us and whispered our doom. We're the Earthshake Crew, a name our friends gave us because our laughter could shake the ground beneath us. My wife and I married in 2009, and hunting was our sacred bond. Every fall, we'd leave our small Virginia town, pack our rifles, and head to a creaking cabin rented from an old man named Earl. His face was weathered like the oak trees he loved, eyes sharp with stories he'd tell over cheap whiskey. He charged us next to nothing for the cabin, asking only for a share of our venison jerky each season. Picture that cabin. Walls of warped pine, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. A single lantern casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Earl's tales were wild, stories of lost miners, cursed valleys, and creatures older than the mountains themselves. We'd laugh them off, but in 2014, one of those stories came alive. November 2014. The cabin groaned under a chilly dawn, the kind that makes your breath fog and your bones ache. We'd been hunting for 3 days, stalking deer through trails we knew by heart, but the forest was stubborn, hiding every buck worth a shot. Frustrated, we decided to try a new spot. 2 miles north into uncharted woods. Close your eyes and see it. A forest older than time itself, trees towering like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches knitting a canopy so thick the sun barely touched the ground. The undergrowth clawed at our boots, brambles snagging like fingers trying to hold us back. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of moss and decay, pressing secrets into our skin. We built our blind from canvas and branches, settling in with rifles ready, our breaths shallow in the crisp morning. 3 hours passed, the sun crawling higher, its light muted by the dense canopy. Feel the forest watching you, its silence heavier than any sound. Then, without warning, the air changed. The temperature plummeted, a bone-deep cold that made my fingers stiffen around my rifle. The forest, alive with bird calls and rustling leaves moments before, fell into a deathly hush. My wife's eyes locked on mine, wide with unease, her breath catching as if she felt it too. A pressure like a storm brewing inside our skulls, squeezing our thoughts. Have you ever stood in a place so still you swear the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to break? I whispered, should we head back? Her nod was quick, her hands already fumbling with our gear, her face pale as the morning mist. Then it came, a sound that didn't belong, a sound that clawed at your soul. Hear it now, a high-pitched screech, like metal grinding against metal, sharp enough to cut through bone, echoing through the trees like a scream from another world. It wasn't a deer, not a bear, not even a bobcat. It was wrong, unnatural, a sound that made my heart stutter and my blood freeze. My wife grabbed my arm, her nails biting into my skin, and pointed to the ridge 200 yards away. See it, in your mind, a shadow moving through the trees taller than any man. Its movements jerky, like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. It walked upright, but its gait was off, too fast, too fluid, navigating the rocky terrain with an ease that wasn't human. Then I saw them. Wings, not feathered like a bird's, but leathery, bat-like, spanning 15 feet or more, glinting faintly in the dim light. Its body was dark, black or deep green, shrouded in shadows that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. We watched, frozen for 10 agonizing seconds before it vanished behind the ridge. Run, run now. The command screamed in my head, an instinct older than reason itself. We grabbed our gear and moved, not running but walking fast, hearts pounding. The screech following us, shifting directions as if it were circling, stalking. Feel the forest closing in, the trees leaning closer, their branches like claws ready to snatch you. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. We reached the cabin, legs trembling, and locked the door, the silence inside deafening after that relentless sound. Can you feel your pulse racing, knowing something's out there, watching, waiting in the dark? That night, Earl's truck rattled up the dirt path, his arms loaded with firewood. My wife, trying to keep her voice light, mentioned what we'd seen. Earl's face changed, his easy smile fading into something hard, almost haunted. "Where'd you see it?" he asked, voice low, like he already knew the answer. When we told him, he leaned back, eyes distant, and said, "That's Snaily Gaster territory. Been stories round here for over 100 years. Part reptile, part bird, with tentacles and a scream like metal on metal." I laughed, thinking, he was spinning one of his tales, but his eyes held no humor. "Stay out of those woods at dawn and dusk," he warned. "It's when it hunts." Picture Earl's face, lined with years of mountain secrets, his words sinking into you like a cold blade. He told us more that night, stories passed down from his grandfather, who'd heard them from his own kin. The Snaily Gaster, he said, was no mere animal. It was a thing of nightmares, born in the shadows of the mountains, with a body that defied nature, scales like a snake, wings like a bat, and tendrils that moved with a mind of their own. It hunted not for food, but for something else, something no one could name. Feel the weight of those stories, the way they wrap around you, making the dark outside the cabin feel alive. We nodded, half believing, and finished our trip on safer grounds, convincing ourselves it was just a large bird. An eagle, maybe, distorted by light and fear. But deep down we knew the truth. The forest doesn't lie, but it hides things you're not meant to see. 5 years passed. We returned each season, sticking to familiar trails, bagging deer, and laughing off the memory as a strange blip in our hunting life. But can you ever truly forget something that looked into your soul? The northern woods became a forbidden place, a shadow in our minds we didn't speak of. We told ourselves it was a trick of the light, a story we'd built up in our heads. But the mountains don't forget, and neither did the snallygaster. November 2019. Our last day of the season, and we'd had a good run. 2 big bucks, their antlers a testament to our skill. Picture the morning. Fog so thick it's like stepping into a dream. The world blurred to 50 yards, trees looming like ghosts in a sea of gray. We set up in a familiar spot a mile east of the cabin, a place we knew like our own home. The air was damp, clinging to our skin. The forest muffled under the weight of the mist. Smelled the wet earth, the decay of leaves, the faint tang of something metallic in the air. We'd been in our blind for an hour, sipping coffee, when a rustle came from a thicket 40 yards ahead. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The snap of twigs, the shift of leaves, something moving closer, deliberate, hungry. I raised my rifle, expecting a deer, my heart steady with the thrill of the hunt. What stepped out wasn't a deer. Freeze that moment. A creature the size of a black bear, but nothing like one. Its long neck craning forward, a beak glinting like polished steel in the fog. Its legs were thick, reptilian, bending at angles that twisted my stomach. From its shoulders writhed 6 tendrils, thick as ropes, curling and twisting like they were tasting the air, searching for us. Its body was dark, almost black, with a way sheen that caught the faint sunlight like oil on water. Feel the air grow heavy, your breath catching, your mind screaming that this can't be real. But it is. We didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared as it scanned the ground, its tendrils flicking like living whips, unaware of us, or so we hoped. Then it made that sound again, a low, grinding screech, like a machine choking on its own gears. Close your eyes and hear it, a sound that burrows into your bones, telling you to run but rooting you in place. It was softer this time, like it was muttering to itself, searching for something lost. But then it froze, its head snapping toward you, our blind. Imagine its gaze locking onto you even through the fog, even through the camouflage, seeing your soul. My wife, trembling, raised her phone to snap a picture, her movement so slight I barely noticed. But it did. The world slows down. See it rear up, 8 feet tall, wings unfurling, leathery and ribbed, like a dragon from a nightmare. It screeched, a sound so loud it stabbed my ears, and lunged, not at us, but parallel, gliding through the fog like a specter, its tendrils trailing like smoke. We waited, hearts hammering, for 10 minutes that felt like hours, the fog swallowing every sound but our own ragged breaths. Feel the weight of that silence, the dread of knowing it's still out there, waiting. We bolted for the cabin, scanning the trees, the sky, every shadow that moved in the mist. The forest felt alive, malevolent, its branches reaching out like fingers. Back at the cabin, my wife checked her phone. No photo. Her hands had been too shaky to press the button. Have you ever been so scared your body betrays you, freezing when you need to act? We packed and left, not even stopping to thank Earl. The road home a blur of silence and fear. At home, safe in our familiar walls, we finally spoke. Let the truth sink in. What we saw wasn't a bird, wasn't a trick of the light. It was the Sinele gaster, just as Earl described, reptilian avian with tendrils and a metallic beak that gleamed like a warning. My wife, ever curious, dug into old records, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through faded articles. The creature's been part of Appalachian lore since the 1700s, with sightings spiking in the early 1900s. Picture those old newspapers, yellowed and brittle, whispering of a monster that shouldn't exist. They described a beast with octopus-like tendrils, sharp teeth, and wings spanning up to 25 feet. Some claimed it had a single eye, glowing like a lantern in the dark, but we couldn't confirm that. It preyed on livestock, sometimes people. Its scream a harbinger of doom. Let me tell you a story within a story. My wife found a journal entry from a miner in 1907, scrawled in shaky handwriting, describing a night in these same woods. He'd been camping alone when he heard that metallic screech. He wrote of a shadow with wings and tendrils, circling his fire, its single eye burning through the dark. He survived, but never hunted again, haunted by the feeling that it was still out there searching for him. Feel that miner's fear, his words echoing across a century, binding us to the same nightmare. What haunts me most is the consistency. Twice, 5 years apart, we saw the same creature, same leathery wings, same grinding screech, same unnatural presence. Both times it was searching, like it was hunting something it couldn't find. Feel that chill down your spine knowing it's still out there, waiting in the fog. I don't know if it's a legend come to life, an undiscovered species, or something older, something that doesn't belong in our world. But it's real, and it's in those mountains. The next time you're in the woods, listen for that metallic scream. If you hear it, run, don't look back, don't ever look back. The night was a thief, stealing light and leaving only shadows that whispered lies. I was 5 years old, curled in a bed too big for me, in a house nestled deep in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky, where the forest pressed so close, it felt like it was breathing down our necks. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp leaves and something older, something that didn't belong. My name is Theo, and I grew up in a world where the trees held secrets, where the darkness wasn't just empty but alive, watching, waiting. That night something came for me, wearing my mother's face but not her heart. It was the Lady of the Woods, and she wanted me to follow. Our house was a small, weathered thing, its wooden walls stained by years of rain and wind, perched on a patch of cleared land where the forest reluctantly gave way. The creek behind our property murmured day and night, its voice a constant hum beneath the birdsong and rustling leaves. My childhood was simple, playing in the yard, riding my bike down dirt roads, catching crawdads in the creek with my hands, their tiny claws pinching my fingers. But beneath that simplicity was a shadow, a tension that grew when I was 5. My parents were unraveling. Dad worked long hours at a car dealership, not selling but fixing, his hands always smudged with grease, his evenings stolen by mandatory overtime. Mom worked part-time at the Dollar General, her days spent ringing up canned goods and diapers, her nights consumed by worry over bills. Their arguments echoed through our thin walls, sharp and relentless, about money, about time, about who forgot to pick me up from kindergarten. I'd lie in bed, my pillow pressed over my ears, their voices seeping through, each word a stone in my stomach. I was terrified they'd split, like my friend Tommy's parents, who'd left him shuttling between an apartment and weekends with his dad. The thought of losing them, of our home breaking apart, kept me awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, my heart racing with fears too big for a child to name. That fall, when the leaves turned brittle and scraped against my bedroom window. It happened. I woke to a touch on my shoulder. Not gentle, but sharp, impatient, pulling me from sleep like a hook. My eyes opened to darkness, the room cold, colder than it should have been with the heater humming. A figure stood beside my bed. Its shape, familiar, the curve of her hair, the slope of her shoulders. It was Mom, or so I thought. Her long white nightgown glowing faintly in the dim light of my Batman nightlight. She didn't speak, didn't smile, just raised a hand, her finger curling in a gesture that said, "Come with me." I was confused, my mind foggy with sleep, but I obeyed, sliding out of bed, my bare feet prickling against the chilly floorboards. The room felt wrong, the air heavy, the shadows too thick, as if they were watching, waiting for me to move. She walked to the window, its wooden frame warped and peeling, already open halfway, letting in a draft that smelled of wet earth and decay. That struck me as odd even then. I never opened my windows. They were old, swollen with damp, nearly impossible to budge without help, their counterweights broken, requiring a stick to prop them up. But there it was, open, the night. Beyond a black void swallowing the world, the figure leaned out, then turned back, her hand beckoning again, her silhouette framed against the darkness. "Follow me," her gesture seemed to say, a command I couldn't resist. I hesitated, glancing around the room, my nightlight flickering, casting shapes that didn't match the furniture. My digital clock glowed 4:00 a.m., its red numbers stark against the gloom. When I looked back, she was outside, her upper body visible as she leaned in, still motioning, her presence pulling me like a tide. I climbed onto the windowsill, my small hands gripping the rough wood, the cold night air biting my face, the silence outside absolute, unnatural. I hoisted myself up, my pajamas catching on the frame, and then nothing. My memory cuts off, a blank space where hours should be. The next thing I knew, I was lying in the mulch of Mom's flower bed, just below my window, the morning dew soaking. Through my clothes, my body shivering, my arms and face scratched from the holly bush I'd landed in. My parents' voices woke me, sharp with panic, shouting my name. I blinked against the gray dawn, disoriented, my head heavy, my skin stinging. "Why did you make me sleep outside, Mom?" I asked, my voice small, my eyes searching her face. Her expression froze, a mix of confusion and fear, her hands trembling as she reached for me. "Theo, what are you talking about?" she said, her voice breaking. Dad scooped me up, his arms strong but shaking, carrying me inside while Mom checked me for injuries, her fingers gentle but frantic. They asked how I got outside, if I'd climbed out myself, if I'd been sleepwalking. I told them Mom came to my room, led me through the window, but their faces paled, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange. "Honey, I was in bed all night," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never came to your room." Dad inspected the window, still open, but found no signs of tampering. No marks on the frame. For weeks they checked it every night, ensuring it was locked until Dad nailed it shut, the hammer's rhythm a grim promise of safety. I tried to forget, to bury the memory, but it lingered, a question mark in the dark, a shadow that followed me through the years. Time softened the edges of that night. By the time I was 7, my parents had stitched their marriage back together. Dad got a better job, his hours more predictable, and they started counseling at the church, their arguments fading into quiet conversations. They went on date nights, every Friday, leaving me with my cousin Melissa, who let me stay up late watching cartoons. They seemed happier, their laughter filling the house. But as I grew older, I felt a new kind of distance. At 12, middle school was a battlefield. I was smaller than my peers, an easy target for taunts. My clothes never quite right, my interests, video games, comic books, marking me as an outsider. My friends drifted toward sports and girls, leaving me behind, my world shrinking to my room, my Game Boy, my stacks of Spider-Man comics. I craved my parents' attention, but they were busy. Dad with yard work, Mom with cleaning, both with each other. Their date nights a reminder of my isolation. "Not now, honey," or "Can it wait until after dinner?" became their refrain. Each dismissal a stone in my chest, building a wall I didn't know how to climb. One Friday in late September, with their date night looming, I decided to run away. Not forever, just for a day, to make them notice, to make them worry. It was a child's plan, impulsive and foolish, born of loneliness rather than logic. I stayed up all night, my eyes, heavy but determined, packing a backpack with saltine crackers, granola bars, a water bottle, my Game Boy Advance, a flashlight, a comic book, and a light jacket. At 5:30 a.m., as the sky began to lighten, I slipped out the back door, the morning cool and misty, the forest beyond our yard a dark, inviting mystery. My sneakers were soaked with dew within moments, the cold seeping into my feet. But I pressed, on following a path I knew, stopping half a mile in at a big oak tree I liked to climb. I settled beneath it, the house still visible through the trees, a faint outline in the dawn. The morning passed slowly. I played Pokemon on my Game Boy, ate crackers, and imagined my parents' panic, their apologies, their promises to spend more time with me. I climbed the oak, my hands gripping rough bark but couldn't get high, my arms too weak. I threw rocks at other trees, aiming for knots in the wood, my mind spinning stories of being a survivalist, living off the land. By what I guessed was Demui a.m., I ate a granola bar, rationing my food, the plan to stay out all day, feeling less certain. Boredom crept in, the forest's hum no longer thrilling but monotonous, the chill in the air sharper. Around noon I heard footsteps, not from the house but deeper in the woods, deliberate, human-like, not the scamper of an animal. "Mom," I called, hoping they were searching for me. The footsteps stopped, the forest falling silent, a stillness that prickled my skin, as if every tree was watching. Unsettled, I moved, staying near the oak but circling, finding a stream, and following it, then looping back. I sat again, facing deeper into the forest, my Game Boy's batteries dying mid-battle, the screen fading to black. Frustrated, I looked up and froze. There she was. 25 feet away, at the edge of the trees, stood a figure, her shape unmistakable. Mom's build, her hair, wearing the blue sweater she'd seen her in that morning. But her face was shadowed, too dark to see, her stance wrong, her arms hanging too low, too still, like something mimicking a person but missing the details. "Come with me," she gestured, her hand twitching, a motion that wasn't right. "Mom," I called again, my voice shaking. She nodded, slow and deliberate, and beckoned me closer. I stood, my backpack heavy, my heart pounding, already moving toward her, guilt flooding in. "I'm sorry," I stammered, words spilling out, explaining I'd meant to come home, that I'd run away because I felt ignored, because they were always too busy. I rambled, my voice cracking, but she didn't respond, just turned and walked deeper into the woods, glancing back, gesturing for me to follow. I followed, but something felt wrong. Her silence, her speed, the way she stayed just out of reach. Her figure a flicker in the shadows, never quite real. The trees grew denser, older, the path fading into underbrush that scratched my legs through my jeans, the air thick with the scent of moss and decay. "Why are you going so fast?" I called, jogging to keep up, my breath uneven. "Where are we going?" She didn't slow, didn't answer, just moved deeper, leading me into a part of the forest where the light dimmed, where the world felt wrong, like a dream turning sour. The rational part of my mind screamed to stop, to turn back, but I kept going, driven by guilt, by the need to hope, by the figure was my mother. Then I didn't see it. The ground dropped away, a steep ravine, and I fell, hitting rocks and branches, tumbling down until I landed hard at the bottom, my breath knocked out, my chest tight. For a moment I couldn't breathe, panic clawing, like a wave. When I gasped in air, I coughed, my body aching, my arm bleeding from a gash, scratches stinging my skin. I checked myself, no broken bones, but the pain lingered. The ravine was deep, its sides loose dirt and rock, the dry creek, bed littered with stones. I didn't recognize this place, so far from home, so alien. I tried to climb up, but the slope crumbled, my shoes slipping, my hands scraping raw. I fell back, twice, my knees bruised, my hope fading. I shouted for my parents, my voice hoarse, echoing in the hollow, but no answer came. I sat for half an hour, listening to the forest's silence broken only by the occasional bird, my fear growing. I crossed to a less steep side, climbing up by gripping roots, pulling myself out, my muscles burning. But freedom was a trap, a forest stretched endless. No path, no landmarks, just trees upon trees. The canopy blocking the sun. I picked a direction, wandering, screaming for help until my voice broke, my feet aching, my scratches burning. As dusk fell, the forest darkened, orange light filtering through the leaves, panic tightening its grip. Night came, absolute. No moon, no stars. My flashlight dying after 20 minutes, leaving me blind, stumbling over roots, tripping on rocks, my fear a living thing. Exhausted, I collapsed against a tree, its bark rough against my back, and cried myself to sleep. My sobs, fading into the dark. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke to a sensation, not alone. I was sitting in someone's lap, my back against a body, ice cold, like it had been carved from frost. Something sharp grazed my cheek, a nail or claw, its touch tender, but wrong, sending shivers through me. I looked up expecting Mom, her familiar hair framing her face, relief flooding in. "Mom," I whispered, but as my eyes adjusted, the truth hit. It wasn't her. The face had a mouth, wide and stretched, a smile with no lips, but where eyes, nose, and eyebrows should have been, there was only smooth, pale skin, a blank mask staring down. The smile widened, unnatural, and I screamed, scrambling away, my heart pounding, my breath ragged. When I looked back, it was gone, the forest empty, but the air was heavy, watching. Then I heard Dad's voice, distant but real, calling my name, deep and hoarse, unmistakable. I shouted back, my voice breaking, sobbing between calls. Flashlight beams cut through the dark and I saw them. Mom, Dad, police officers, search and rescue volunteers running toward me. Mom wrapped me in her arms, crying as hard as I was, her warmth grounding me. "Thank God," Dad kept saying, his voice thick. They carried me home, an hour through the woods, my body bruised, my mind reeling. Paramedics cleaned my cuts, bandaged my arm, while police asked gentle questions, their voices soft but probing. I told them about running away, about the shadow that led me, about the faceless thing in the woods. They listened, nodding, but their eyes held doubt. Later, my parents sat with me asking about the lady. I described her, the blank face, the smile, how it felt like the same thing from when I was 5. Mom made the sign of the cross, her face pale, Dad's silence heavy. They made me promise never to go into the woods alone, to talk to them if I felt neglected. I kept that promise. We moved a year later, Dad's new job taking us far from those mountains. I overheard him talking to a neighbor about other kids who'd vanished in those woods. Some found, some not. I don't know what she was, why she wore my mother's face, why she wanted me. She was real and she was waiting. If you take anything from this, take two things. Don't run from your family, talk to them. And don't follow shadows into the woods, no matter whose face they wear. Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, our backyard was a gateway to a forest that felt alive, its trees whispering secrets older than time. As a kid, I loved our family bonfires, the crackle of flames, the laughter of grown-ups, the sweet burn of marshmallows on my tongue. But one night when I was 8, something came out of those woods, something small, angry, and impossibly real. Picture a tiny figure, no taller than a child, with a pointed green hat and eyes that burn with rage, chasing men twice its size. My name is Ted, and this is the story of the night Uncle Lester met a gnome that wasn't from any fairy tale. Let me take you back to that firelit night, when the line between warmth and terror blurred. Our home was a modest cabin, tucked into a clearing where the mountains loomed like silent giants. Feel the air, thick with the scent of pine and smoke. The forest's edge so close you could reach out and touch it. Bonfires were our family's ritual, especially when Uncle Lester came over. He was a bear of a man, graying even then, with a laugh that echoed through the trees. He'd bring a cooler of Budweiser, his on-again, off-again girlfriend Sherry, and his beat-up acoustic guitar. See them in your mind. Lawn chairs circling the fire, neighbors and co-workers swapping stories, the flames casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. As a kid, I was allowed to stay until 9, roasting marshmallows and soaking in the grown-up talk. But then Mom would shoo me to bed. Feel that childish frustration, knowing the real story started after you were gone. My bedroom window faced the backyard, the fire's glow a faint orange against the glass. Imagine lying in bed, the house quiet, the distant hum of voices lulling you to sleep. One summer night when I was 8, I lay awake, the air warm and sticky, the forest outside whispering with the rustle of leaves. The bonfire was in full swing, laughter and clinking bottles drifting through my window. Hear the joy, the carefree chatter, but feel that undercurrent of unease like the woods are listening too. I was drifting off when the night changed. A shout, not angry but sharp, panicked, cut through the air, followed by the sound of feet pounding across the yard. I sat up, heart racing, and peered out the window. The fire was dying, its embers glowing like eyes, but the yard was too dark to see clearly. Feel the tension, the sudden shift from warmth to fear. The back door slammed open, then shut, the lock clicking into place. Hear the urgency, the heavy breaths of men running from something. Then came laughter, loud, uncontrollable, but tinged with something else, something nervous. It was Dad and Uncle Lester, their voices low but shaking, like they'd seen something they couldn't explain. Imagine their faces, flushed from beer and fear, laughing to keep the terror at bay. I rolled my eyes, thinking they were just drunk, and eventually fell back asleep, the memory fading into the haze of childhood. Let me take you forward years later to a night that brought it all back. I was 35, with a family of my own, living in a house far from those mountains. Uncle Lester came over for dinner, sprawling on my couch with a beer, his gray hair thinning but that mischievous grin unchanged. See him now, older, slower, but still the man who made bonfires magical. The kids were glued to Sonic the Hedgehog, their laughter filling the room. Something, maybe the flicker of the TV, maybe the beer, stirred that old memory. "Hey, Uncle Lester," I said, keeping my voice light. "Remember those bonfires at Mom and Dad's? That one night you and Dad came running inside, laughing but scared?" His eyebrows shot up and that grin spread wider. Holy crap, Ted. You remember that? Feel the spark of recognition, the way his eyes light up, pulling you back to that night. He glanced at the kids, making sure they were distracted, then leaned in, his voice low. You won't believe it, but I'll tell you anyway. Listen closely. Can you hear the forest in his words? The crackle of that long-ago fire? He took a swig of beer, settling into the story like it was a song he'd played 1,000 times. Your dad and I were the last ones out there, he began. Fire was burning low, just embers, and we were pretty buzzed, swapping stories about work, the usual. Then, out of nowhere, and I swear this on my life, this little man comes charging out of the woods. Picture it. A figure no taller than 2.5 feet darting from the trees, a pointed green hat perched on his head. His nose was long, his ears stretched wide, like they'd been pulled taut over years. He was dressed in tattered clothes, not modern but old, like something from a forgotten time. Feel the absurdity, the shock, your mind struggling to make sense of it. He wasn't a kid, Ted, Lester said, his eyes serious. This was a man, small but fierce, and he was mad as hell, yelling in some language I couldn't understand, like he was cursing us out. Hear that voice, sharp and guttural. Words tumbling over each other, alien but unmistakably angry. Lester laughed, but it was nervous, like he was still convincing himself it was real. He came straight at us, running around the fire pit, waving. His little arms. We were scared out of our minds, but laughing too, 'cause it was so damn weird. Feel their panic, 2 grown men stumbling around a dying fire, chased by something that shouldn't exist. They bolted for the house, the gnome hot on their heels, his tiny feet pounding the earth. Imagine the yard, dark except for the fire's glow, the forest a wall of shadows watching it all. They made it inside, slamming the door, locking it tight, and collapsed into laughter. Wild, breathless, the kind that masks fear. Feel that relief, the safety of walls, but the lingering dread that something's still out there. I laughed, shaking my head. You're pulling my leg, right? Lester held up his hand like he was swearing an oath. Ask your dad. We both saw it, described the same thing. Green hat, long nose, ears like stretched leather. Nobody around here's that small, Ted. It wasn't a kid, wasn't an animal. Feel the weight of his words, the certainty in his voice pulling you into his truth. They went out the next morning, hungover and skeptical, but found nothing. No footprints, no trace. Just the cold. Ashes of the fire. Imagine the yard in daylight. Ordinary but wrong. Like the forest swallowed its secrets. Let me tell you a story Lester shared later. One he'd heard from an old neighbor years before. She'd lived on that land her whole life, and she spoke of the little folk who guarded the woods. They were older than the mountains, she said, tied to the earth itself, quick to anger if you trespassed on their domain. Picture her, wrinkled and wise, her voice low as she warns of tiny figures watching from the trees. One man, she said, had cut down a sacred oak and woke to find his tools scattered, his crops trampled, and a tiny hat left on his porch. Feel the chill of that story, its echo in Lester's tale, binding the past to the present. That night stayed with me, a puzzle I couldn't solve. Was it just beer and shadows or something more? Feel that question linger, the line between dream and reality blurring. Uncle Lester never saw it again, but he'd glance at the wood sometimes, like he was waiting for that tiny figure to return. The forest keeps its secrets, but it never forgets. I don't know what we stirred up that night, but I know this. If you're ever by a fire in the Appalachian woods and hear footsteps too small to be human, don't laugh. Run. Lock the door. and pray it doesn't follow you.